Good morning, my name is Lori Longs-Painter. I am the coordinator for the Cuyahoga County Conference on Social Welfare. We welcome you to our 9th annual event. On your tables, you will find a welcome from Dean Gilmore from the Mandel School, if you take a chance to read that. And next we have greetings from Cleveland State University.
Good morning, everyone. I bring you greetings on behalf of one of the sponsors, Cleveland State University School of Social Work. I've been asked by Kathleen Lewandowski, our director, to welcome you today. So welcome to the 9th Annual Conference on Social Welfare. And it's great to be here at this conference, which has been so ably coordinated for the last several years by Lori. So, we are all welcome here as social workers and as human service workers and those who care about the clients and communities we serve. Greater Cleveland is one of the best places in the country to learn and practice social work. This year's keynote address also serves as the 2019 Winifred Bell Lecture, supported by a bequeath from CSU Professor Emerita Winifred Bell. Professor Bell found her work with CSU students to be enriching and highly rewarding. Prior to joining the CSU faculty, Professor Bell earned her MSW at the University of Michigan. Later, she worked with the Kennedy administration to shape social welfare policy. She was the author of 6 books, from the textbook with the title of a CSU course, Contemporary Social Welfare, to Neglecting the Many, Helping the Few, the impact of the 1967 AFDC work incentives. She was an early supporter of the National Jobs for All Coalition, which is now working to support legislation guaranteeing jobs for all. It's only fitting that this year's Winifred Bell Lecture be delivered by Dr. Darlyne Bailey, who also has professional roots here in Cleveland, as you know from the introduction by Cleve. She will be introduced by Professor Emeritus John Yankee, and his many credentials are outlined in the program. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
It is indeed my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Darlyne Bailey. Educationally, she has an A.B. degree in psychology and secondary education from Lafayette College. She has an M.S. degree in psychiatric social work. She has her doctorate degree in organizational behavior from our Weatherhead School of Management here at Case. Her early social work professional journey was in the mental health area. She was a coordinator of specialized treatment programs at a guidance center in the New York area, and later as a director of emergency assistance access services at a community mental health organization. During that time, she began as a field instructor for the New York University School of Social Work. She returned to the Cleveland area in the middle 80s, was an instructor at Tri-C, and then we lured her into the higher academy here to work with us at the Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences and at the Weatherhead School of Management. She moved up through the ranks and became the dean at the Mandel School, where she served for approximately 8 years. She was then lured away from us, many of us regretting it muchly. And she then became the vice president for academic affairs and the dean at Teachers College at New York, at Columbia University. And I think they also had her serving as 1 year as a president there. That was followed then by her move to the University of Minnesota, where she was a professor and the dean at the College of Education and Human Development. The president there was also intelligent enough to see a real resource, and she became likewise an assistant to the president there. That was followed then by her move to Bryn Mawr and the Graduate School of Social Work and Social Research, where she continues. She was a professor. She was the dean at Bryn Mawr, and yes, she was a special assistant to the president to help develop community partnerships. An excellent role for her. Particularly relevant to this conference, I think, is the fact that she founded and continued to direct the Social Justice Institute at Bryn Mawr. And likewise, she became involved and continues as a co-chair for a special commission to advance macro practice in social work. This group was particularly influential when in 2015, the Council on Social Work Education modified the academic standards to include much more macro language. And also, this commission produced the first ever specialized curricular guide for macro social work. Dr. Bailey is currently involved contractually with NASW and Oxford Press to produce the first ever, the inaugural, Encyclopedia of Macro Social Work. If I tried to tell you all the honors and the awards that she has achieved, it would take up her entire speaking time. Suffices to say that she has been recognized in every community by that community and by the professional organizations. I would be hesitant if I didn't, however, mention that she was recently awarded one of the highest NASW honors, and that is being identified as an NASW pioneer in social work, a highly prestigious award. When I asked Dr. Bailey, among all of these awards, what brings you the greatest satisfaction? And as you get to know Darlyne the professional and Darlyne the person, you would not be surprised as she would say, the thing that makes me most happy is that I made my mom and dad proud. I give you Dr. Bailey.
Okay. So 2 things. 1, 2 days ago I had no voice. Today I've got a little voice. You're lucky, because I like to talk. Thank you so much, John. As I look out and see some familiar faces, but a whole lot of people I have yet to meet, it's just great to be back home. Whew, I'm getting emotional. To you all. Okie dokie then. Yeah, we got to keep it real, right? In all the positions that I've had, I've been either or both, the first woman and the first black person. And you know, you got a lot of responsibility because you don't want to be the last one, right? So I hope I do justice to my heroes and my godmother, Winifred, my grandma, Belle, my grandma, Douglas, and my parents that left way too soon, a year after each other, even though I know my mom was saying, Arthur, can you give me a little time to myself? But yeah, when you come from Harlem, New York City, and you know what life is really about, you know that the best thing you can do is to make your parents proud. And I am so blessed that they are. I don't talk past tense. because real love transcends time and space. All right? Okay, now I know Lori's probably saying, oh my gosh, we're really behind time anyway, and here she goes. So I'm going to try to look down at notes so that I don't do what I just did probably for the last 3 to 5 minutes. I am truly, truly honored and truly, truly delighted to be here today. And I want to thank the conference organizers again for inviting me, even before we knew what the theme was going to be. And then shortly after, I said yes, the theme was determined. And I saw this as basically a 2-part rallying call. First, to talk about the integration of micro and macro, and then to talk about steadfastly advocating for social justice. And can I get an amen? We need that now more than ever. So both of these areas wonderfully resonate with how I continue to purposely show up in life. And knowing those just added to I am totally thrilled to be here with you today. And when I looked at our conference themes and then I looked at all the sessions, I immediately knew that I was going to be among kindred others. Yet seconds after I had that sense of exhilaration, I was like, uh-oh, what am I going to tell them that's really new news? What's going to be keynote worthy for my family, friends, and friends in the making here, right here in Cuyahoga County in Cleveland? So it took me a little longer just to think about it. And then I realized that most often you're probably like me. We're doing the do. We're keeping our heads down, just moving forward, doing our lives. And we rarely take a moment to breathe. We rarely take a moment to look and see who's even around us. And we rarely remember who we really are. So, like me, you chose to be here today. And I believe it's because we all are social justice warriors. And I want to talk a little bit about that today. Because, as one of my other dear friends, Mort Mandel, told me, the most precious thing that we have in life is good health, but also time. And how we choose to invest our time is most important. Because once it's gone, it's gone. Even money can come back. You chose to invest your time at this incredible conference, and I want you to do everything you can, which sometimes means putting away the cell phones, to be present, because this time is never going to come back again. These people, the opportunities you have to meet, to give, and to receive gifts is not going to happen again. And my friends, none of that is in my notes. So, Lori, I'm sorry again. I'm just feeling the spirit and feeling called to share all this with you. And I hope some of it's making sense. So in the next, however long I have, I invite you to kind of sit back and try to remember with me that we are social justice warriors, and together is when we're most powerful. So to begin, let's first just breathe. Let's just breathe and center ourselves. And yes, I start staff meetings, and I start my classes this way. I won't do reflections and things like that with you. But to be grounded and present in the moment is most important. I didn't hear it, but I'm trusting you did breathe. Okay, now I'm going to ask you to look at these 2 screens. I'm going to ask you to look at 3 pictures that I'm going to show on these screens, courtesy of the cover of a very, very special issue of Reflections, which is the 24-year-old online journal, about which you'll hear more later. Okay, now, think about what you see. Anybody want to call out what they saw? Okay. May not be showing up quite, but it's a golden-colored horse. He's a light brown golden. Now let's broaden our view to learn a little bit more. What do you see? Horses. Cute. Okay, and the golden one's still there, right? So it's about a total of 6 horses and a little baby in there as well. Now, our last slide gives us a more wide-angle view. And what you see there, do you see a lot of horses? There are about 21 of them, galloping through a body of water. Now, if you did, you're 100% correct. Yet even within this picture, there's more to understand. Did you see that these horses are actually part of a self-organized herd? If you didn't, you're not alone. Only as the very proud mama of a relatively new, no, she's not you, I'm the new mom of a young Nakota mare. Her name's Anna. If anybody wants to see pictures, I've got them. But what I know, and what my classes that I teach on organizational behavior now know, is that a horse's herd is critical to its psychological well-being. And even more importantly, a horse's herd is essential physically for the actual survival of these wonderful creatures. Now that we all know this, it's easy to see that this aspect of the picture makes sense. And with that understanding, that's a recognition that makes our perception complete. This fuller understanding of the picture reflects not only the real world of horses, my friends, but it also is true for us as human beings. Our well-being and our survival is at stake now, yet all is not lost. Today, we're so fortunate that our conference organizers knew this. Well, maybe not about horses, but about the real world of people, the lived experience of the integration of the micro horses and our macro herds, and the transformative power of that integration. Yes, as we think about it, even the people who aren't here today, even people who, unlike ourselves, spend almost all of their time alone, physically alone, even they interact with others at some point, be it on social media, be it sometimes in person, even in their prayers. Yet, like the rest of us, even these people are always affected by the lives of others. So remembering that everyone is part of a larger system, part of the seen and the unseen herds that we all embody. We call them now social identities, that we all embody at different points in time, is essential for us as social workers and human service workers. It's essential for us as professionals to fully understand who our clients are and therefore how best to serve them. By the way, anybody know what March is? Elevate, okay? It's also today, March 8th, is International Women's Day. All right? And it's also the week before one of my favorite organizations who's part of what I'm going to be talking about in a moment, the Network for Human Service Managers. It's before their celebration of social work and human service managers. So March is a pretty special month, but this day is most important because we're together. Okay, back to the notes, sorry. Now, while these horses are endangered, and again, truly, I'd love to tell you more about them, but also increasingly endangered is social justice. While it's endangered, it's also the perfect lens through which to look at what I refer to as the two ends of our client system. The micro and the macro, the individuals, organizations, families, small groups, and the organizations and the communities and the policies that are ideally are there to serve them. Yes, like our micro clinical direct practice, we have macro direct practice because, as most of you know, I hope, there is nothing indirect about working with organizations and communities. So when we talk about micro direct practice, we need to talk about macro direct practice. Now, it's only when we appreciate the reality of the multiple interconnections and therefore the many, many interdependencies that we have on one another, are we able to fully utilize our powers as social justice warriors. In other words, only in honoring the reality of our herds are we able to fully unleash the powers of our micro and macro perspectives, what is also usually referred to, at least historically, as case, micro, and cause, respectively. Yes, it's only in the unification of these services that we have the potential to become this type of leader, to really be the social justice warrior who's best equipped to engage in the multiple activities that are required to address the onslaught of the multiple, the multitude, the increasingly complex and constant number of social issues that are plaguing us all. Your sessions later today will very well address many of these challenges to the health and the well-being of us all. This morning, I'm going to offer one framework to use in going through all of your sessions today. I apologize. A quick walk, or should I now say a quick trot, through time reveals that since the 1800s, the focus on social work in this country has shifted back and forth between micro and macro, case and cause, horse and herd, giving primacy to either the individual or the community. So while this shifting has been in large measure due to some of the major historical events that have occurred in our country, it's also undoubtedly contributed to the images that most people have in mind when they think about social work. Way back when, with the caseworker with the black welfare boot, checking the homes to see where there was a man's foot under the curtains. Many of you may not remember those times. But more importantly, these images, these events, have greatly contributed to the curricula of our professional schools and programs. And most importantly, these events have shaped the world of our practice as well. So throughout the history of our profession, there have been decades where the primary focus of social work has been on individual, family, small groups. Our casework, like in the 1920s, the 40s, the 50s, there gotta be some people here that were around in the 40s, maybe? Around in the 50s? Oh, come on, you're not telling the truth. Okay. The 80s and the 90s. Those were the times when casework had primacy. And if we had more time, I'd tell you about the historical events as well. And then there have been other times in our history where the focus has shifted and our educational institutions have included then more of the macro content in our courses and more looking at organizations and policies, the cause, such as in the 30s and the 60s. How many of you were around in the 60s? Just around. You may have been in diapers, okay, but you were around. Oh, not a lot of you. So within macro practice, policy was deemed again important in the 2000s, particularly with the economic recessions that we had in 2007 and 2008, where we had the heightened re-awareness, I'm going to say, of the growing disparities in healthcare and in education. Yet this time, surprisingly, there wasn't the expected corresponding increase in macro content in our courses, in our professional schools. So this naturally resulted in a declining number of students graduating with macro direct knowledge and skills, while there was a growth in the area of clinical private practice. With this in mind, in 2012, a very dear colleague named Jack Rothman authored what has now been known as the Rothman Report. Jack's intention in doing his research with a colleague out of Pitt, Tracy Sousa, was to sound the alarm, to really make certain that we were all awake to what was going on. And the findings from the data in the Rothman report, which was revised in 2013, it predicted that if this trend, this decrease of macro content, this decrease of macro practitioners, if this continued, our profession's ability to address troubling issues at the community level, troubling issues at the societal level through our policies would become, what he quotes and says, greatly truncated. In short, the usual historical shift between focusing more or less on micro and macro, that shift had to be steadied. Many more programs needed to teach many more students macro content, regardless of whether they were leaning into clinical or not. So Rothman warned us that it was only in so doing that our country would be able to influence and shape public policies locally and nationally in order to, among other things, ensure the provision of quality social services to safeguard, if not advance, the well-being of those we serve, and I would say, and of us all. An immediate and significant response to this problem, revealed by the Rothman report, was the formation of what John talked about, a special commission. So in 2013, several members of the then 24-year-old Association of Community Organizing and Social Administration, which just changed its title to Community Organizing and Social Action, it reached out to colleagues across the country. And we were asked to come together for 8 months to explore and to develop strategies to counter this problem. And yes, I was among those who were honored to be called, and I emphatically said yes. And then a couple of days later, I said that yes again to becoming chair of this special commission. 8 months, I can do this. Being a licensed clinician, as well as a macro practitioner, and a very high extrovert. Anybody out there a high extrovert? Nobody? Oh, okay, thank you. Oh, being all of that, you'll understand this. I asked for a partner. I asked for a partner recommending a woman named Terry Mizrahi. And thankfully, Terry said yes. And now, 6.5 years later, our 500 plus and growing individuals and organizational partners of what we now call the Special Commission to Advance Macro Practice in Social Work we all continue to work together. If you're interested in becoming a part of this, it doesn't cost anything but your head and your heart, okay? And hopefully you're in this room. Those are things that you'd like to share. We've been coming together electronically at conferences to begin to take a look and try to solve some of the problems. But because we don't have very many things that are black and white anymore, problems, but to actually begin to untangle some of the dilemmas, which is what we all deal with these days. Those competing truths, that gray area that makes everything a little bit more tricky to know how to handle. More importantly, and most importantly, the Special Commission remains highly productive. So again, as a super proud mama, allow me to mention, John mentioned, I want to just reiterate, 2 achievements as noted in our 2018 Special Commission Summary Report. One of the most recent outcomes was our collaboration with the Council in Social Work Education, CSWE, our accrediting body. One was influencing the standards, major deal. So any school program that comes up in 2015 now will have organizations, communities, and policy in there explicitly. The other major was in December, we celebrated the production of the very first ever guide on how to teach macro practice. And working with a national task force of 70 faculty and staff across the country, because all the deans and directors were given a letter and asking them to nominate folks. we now have this guide that actually will be in all the accredited schools of social work. We're making it available for field placements, field agencies, social service agencies. This guide aligns with the professional standards. So people can't say, well, I don't really know how to do this. I don't know how to teach macro. The guide is a resource. It gives curricular information, it gives exercises, it gives books. It's almost 400 pages, but it's awesome. And you can just slide to a particular accreditation standard and learn more about it. The Specialized Practice Curricular Guide for Macro Social Work Practice joins several other guide resources that have been produced by CSWE. The second special commission achievement that John referenced, but I just have to underscore because I am so thrilled, scared, but thrilled, is having been invited to enter into a brand new relationship with NASW Publishing and Oxford Press to produce our very first ever encyclopedia on social work. So we just literally yesterday completed bringing on 8 associate editors. That we were told we could have 5, but we're macro, so we got 8. And all of us will begin to work on this anticipated 2 to 3 volume publication. Yes, in 2013, our special commission went from a moment to being a national movement. And thankfully, we're not alone. Many other associations and groups have come together with the Special Commission, NASW, CSWE, IFP, National Social Work Managers. I could go on and on. I said there are 500 organizations, schools, individuals to form what we call the United for Macro Partnership, offering regional and national sessions at CSWE, NASW, and other professional gatherings. And today, this national movement has been enriched by this conference. I thank you all. You didn't know you were doing this, but for participating in this movement. Again, you want to know anything about this, there's some references at the end, but please feel free to get in touch with me because all we want is your heart and your mind. And again, I know you're here because you've got that. It's working. Central to the work of all of these organizations is the awareness that genuine social justice can only be attained when the needs of everyone are addressed. No surprise. Individuals, families, right? Small groups, organizations, communities. Now, to ensure that I was personally walking my talk, I needed to bring this message to my institution, the smallest place I've ever lived and worked. It's a little place called Bryn Mawr. How many of you even know where Bryn Mawr is? Yes, nice. Wow, this side of the room is rocking. Got most of our extroverts over there. They seem to know Bryn Mawr. Well, Bryn Mawr is this tiny little place that has Quaker roots that really spoke to me when I made the decision to come back east to be closer to family. And I also had 5 members of my family that had been diagnosed with cancer at the time. So I needed to step aside. The hardest thing I ever did. With 8,000 students, I wrote this incredible email. But you know what you gotta do when you gotta do it, right? So Bryn Mawr actually has embraced me, embraced the idea of social justice. So 6 months before stepping aside from deaning, which after 24 years of doing one of those things, I started the Social Justice Initiative because my macro folks, in particular my extroverts, will understand you got faith, but just stepping into, you're not sure what, you got to have something to step into. I've since been reminded of what I preach is that faith and fear don't coexist very well. In fact, Lori, don't kill me, but I got to share this adage with you because if you have relatives down south, you may have seen this on the doors, okay? Thank you. Fear knocked on the door. Faith opened it. There was no one there. our responsibility is to show up and be faithful, to trust that the ground that we're walking on is going to be there to meet our feet. So with this social justice initiative, I've got this very small yet deeply engaged advisory council and an even smaller yet dedicated and hardworking staff. We're surrounded by and accountable to a network of now several hundred folks. Our SJI, our Social Justice Initiative, not yet an institute, John, but we're on our way, actively engages with like-minded neighborhood-based and national groups to co-create a more just world for all. Our SJI believes that there are several levers that, once pulled, can transform the lives of individuals, families, and their organizations and communities. We know that just as today we're being reminded that fear and hatred and othering are contagious, so can be acts of genuine social justice. We are certain that collectively, these 4 essential elements can be used by all of us, just like hate can be taught from when you're little. So can social justice be taught from when you're very little. So we know that if we look at even just these 4 lenses, look through them at life, we will be able to work together to invoke transformative healing. We see these required ingredients for genuine social justice as forgiveness, courage, and compassion, cultural humility, and radical love. Talk more about them in a moment. So on May 4th of 2017, we had an official launch of our SJI with the conference at this little college. The conference was titled, Practicing the Science and Art of Forgiveness, Beginning a Transformative Journey. Little secret, I was told many years ago, if you put a colon in your title, your articles, your books, they're more likely to be published. Just a little thing. And they're more likely to be accepted at a conference too. Just a little tip. So, of course, our conference had to have a colon in it. Here's our flyer. Now, do you remember the first time you ever threw a big party? Do you remember being a bit nervous about who would show up or if anybody would show up? Well, that was me. After talking about this big beginning, and I hope you can get a sense, I can talk, and I can talk about big beginnings. And I got everybody excited to join me in days and hours and months to plan and, yes, pray. We began looking up the contact information of others around the country and around the globe who'd spent most of their lives studying and practicing where we wanted to start, which was with forgiveness. So I got on the phone with each one of the people who are on this poster, and I asked 2 of them to be the opening, one to be the opening keynoter, one to be the closing keynoter, 3 panelists, and then there were 11 people that aren't on the poster that I invited to be breakout session facilitators, and I equipped each one of them with a process recorder as well. So these were all exceptional people, and you may not know them, and someone's cell phone does need to be quieted. Because I'm about to tell you a name, and that may just be because this name I'm going to mention, hopefully you've heard of her. Okay, this is applause for Fania Davis. Now, Fania Davis, the woman in the middle, doing the do, okay? Fania Davis was one of the 2 sisters in the Davis family who, among other accomplishments, went back to school to get her law degree to defend her sister. Angela Davis, anybody remember? I mean, I rocked my Angela Davis afro at Lafayette. There were 9 women of color on the campus. It was the first time they had women out of the 2,000 students. Okay, like I said, I've been the first in a lot of places. But I got on the phone and I called Fania. And as my mom would say, I didn't have a pot to piss in. Now, that may need some translation for some of you. That means I didn't have any money. These truly incredible people all agreed to come. I mean, Fania said to me, "Sister, I hear you. I'm there. I don't need a dime. I said, well, at least let me get some money to pay for your transportation. I mean, it was just awesome. It was just awesome. Well, that day we had hoped for about 80 to 100 people to come and stay, maybe even for half the day. 350 people came and stayed the whole day. Incredible, incredible. So we knew we were on to something. So the debut of our social justice initiative affirmed my lifelong belief that with the right idea, held by the right people working on it, sheer magic at the right time can happen. Just remember that. All is possible with those ingredients. The right people, the right time, the right idea. And it did. So allow me to, where's my Lori to tell me how much time I have? But in any event, I'm just going to keep going because I don't see her. So allow me to share with you what we mean by each of these required ingredients of genuine social justice, and for the balance of our time together before our Q&A, where I believe the real learning and the excitement takes place, I'm going to share with you the social justice framework. I'm going to do that looking at the focus of most of this afternoon's sessions. I needed to challenge myself to something, right? So I'm going to start where we did at our conference. I'm going to start with forgiveness. In looking at forgiveness now, we just need to think about maybe at least two of our sessions for this afternoon: suicide and opioid addicted survivors. Now, when those who have engaged in life-threatening behaviors or have even attempted to take their own lives, a huge step is taken forward when these survivors first forgive themselves. They forgive themselves for not having been able to live up to our culture-wide portrayal of what a healthy human being is like. They start to seek care. In addition to greatly heightening their probability of living in forgiving themselves, these individuals begin to carry around less toxic self-disparagement, less self-anger, and even hatred that tragically can show up in a multitude of other ways. As one of our conference panelists, psychology professor Everett Washington, told us, we now know, let's see, I can show you Everett. Well, excuse me, I am so sorry for being this blunt. Everett's the white guy here. Marina is from the UK. She has a project called the Forgiveness Project, and she flew in to be with us. Oh, so much more I could tell you about Ulysses and Dorothy. Okay, but forgiveness. Everett talked to us that morning as one of the panelists and told us what we now know from the neuroscience of MRIs, that parts of our brains are actually activated when we forgive and when we ourselves are forgiven, even if we're only forgiven by ourselves. It's incredible. A whole part of our brain lights up. Now, imagine the positive impact on our systems of support if they too operated from places of forgiveness, not by blaming or shaming or even excusing, which are three different but common ways that our very well-intentioned policies and even some of our most caring programs have operated for a long time when they look at these individuals and they look at the societal issues that really have contributed to why these folks are where they're at in life. Archbishop Desmond Tutu, I just have to put this as an aside. Yeah, I had an opportunity to spend time with him. He's as awesome as you think. And his daughter, his older daughter, Empho, outline a 4-step process in their book on forgiveness that they call the fourfold path in the forgiveness cycle. It begins with the micro, the individual level, with you telling your story. And then step number 2, you name the hurt you committed against yourself or another. And then step 3 moves to recognizing our shared humanity and in doing so, granting forgiveness. The fourth and final step in this process would be starting a new relationship with yourself or with the person that you're forgiving. Now, if what was done makes it impossible for you to renew that relationship with another, once you've forgiven the other, the tutus say that you can also choose to release that connection. And these are the foundations that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the hearings are based on. The Archbishop and his daughter are very clear that to forgive does not mean that you have to forget. In fact, in addition to acknowledging that authentic forgiving is not easy, nor is it quick, they believe that fully forgiving requires what they call a fearless remembering of the hurt. And we'll talk more about why it's fearless. Smart and effective city and county and even federal organizations and systems could choose to operate this way. And the construction of impactful mental health policies could then be guided by and guided with forgiveness. Our SJI agrees with the tutus that forgiveness, even at the macro system level, creates the opportunity for social justice to be enacted with what the tutus call the purity of purpose. And that purity does not leave room for punishment or revenge. Number 2, courage and compassion. Yep, I'm cheating. I put them together. We connect them together because, frankly, they work best together. They balance each other. Imagine making a major change in your own life or making a change in a budget if you have to cut something by only being courageous. You'd probably just start cutting, right, to address the immediate problem. Similarly, if you looked at your budget through the lens of compassion, you probably wouldn't even know where to start. Now, my earliest and best teacher for this lesson was right here on this campus, because 3 weeks after becoming tenured, I became the dean of this incredible Mandel school. And this very smart, you'll remember her, and soft-spoken woman, B. Benson. B. Benson was my first budget director at the Mandel School here at Case. And one day, actually week 2 or week 3 of my being here as their dean, B and I were looking at our then unbalanced budget. And I was doing so only through the eyes of compassion. I was constantly finding ways to justify, not canceling a single program or returning a single purchase that we'd made or retracting my agreement that I'd made with the faculty and staff about investing in professional development. And a very clear, firm, she is a lady's lady, and in a gentle voice that I learned was kind of just who B is. B said to me, "With all due respect, Dean Bailey, numbers don't have feelings. They just are." So, yes, it was a lesson well learned. It's stayed with me forever. And oh, by the way, together we balanced that budget and we didn't cancel, return, or retract anything. Now, let's look at 2 possible outcomes from invoking this truly dynamic duo of courage and compassion in the context of at least 6 of today's sessions. Ones that explore the interrelated, may I have that glass of water? Ones that explore the interrelated and deadly outcomes. No, Lori's got my back. Thank you, thank you. 6 sessions that look at lead poisoning on birth outcomes, thanks, John, and infant mortality, especially as this known correlation exists in lower income housing. Now, through courage and compassion, our housing authority administrators and public policy makers would be able to make purposeful, definite, and strategic decisions while at the same time really respecting the joys and the struggles of these families. They'd be able to appreciate the bigger picture, the inequitable system that they and we all live in. Now, additionally, if this result wasn't enough to urge us to move forward with courage and compassion, let me offer you another factoid. The impact of the union of courage and compassion fortifies everyone And this strength, this resiliency, just like what we now know about trauma, can be intergenerational in nature. Resiliency can be intergenerational in nature. As neurology and biology professor Robert Sapolsky wonderfully wrote about 2.5 decades ago in his book titled Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, this fortification through courageous and compassionate acts moderate the effects of stress that almost always emerge and harm everyone's well-being. So over the years, I've learned more and more about the connection between courage and compassion, and also with forgiveness. You remember I said to think about what the Tutu said, but it takes courage to forgive. Remember, they talked about forgiving as a fearless remembering of the hurt you endured. And if we just look at this through the experience of an individual or a community of individuals, for example, we can see that it takes courage and inner strength to be able to really reflect on and remember any injustices committed against ourselves or our people. To touch on the pain, to begin to move through the anger and the blame, to begin to address the wounded part, to pull on the unwounded part, the stronger parts of ourselves, to find a way to feel and then release those toxic emotions, to begin to heal, to begin to forgive. And it takes compassion to forgive as well. The ability to see the person, even ourselves, and even the systems who wounded us as simply human or human-created organizations or systems or policies that at one time believed that he, she, or they what they did was in the best interest of someone. Personally, I think of family in Flint, Michigan, and the water that I bet in most areas of our country that are high in numbers of women and high in numbers of people of color and low in financial wealth. I would bet those waters also have some stuff going on in them. I also think of my friends who protested and continue to protest, although it's not in the papers very much now, at Standing Rock in North Dakota, to keep our government from desecrating their sacred lands that the tribes that are indigenous to that part of our country had never agreed to give up. These people and their many allies also rallied against laying these pipes in Standing Rock that they knew were going to cause the destruction of the land and the water for even their yet unborn children and families. So yes, it takes this combo of courage and compassion to fuel forgiveness. Am I making sense? Number 3, cultural humility. I hope so. This is actually a term that's older than the term most of us are familiar with, which is cultural competence, or even multicultural competence. Yet thankfully, cultural humility is experiencing a rebirth. Admittedly, not doing justice to this concept right now because you didn't bring your pajamas to sit here all morning. Cultural humility is also, like cultural competence, going beyond recognizing to actually honoring our differences and our similarities. But in contrast to cultural competence, cultural humility speaks to an ongoing process of self-awareness, assessment, critique, and development, as opposed to it being an end state. In cultural competency, if you've gone through any training, you know you can reach a point of being told you are now culturally competent. Cultural humility underscores the requirement for being vigilant in addressing and redressing imbalances in terms of equity and power and opportunities of access to resources. With its conceptual roots, believe it or not, in medicine in the late 90s, cultural humility has slowly but steadily been finding its place in social work. Friends and colleagues like the now retired social work professor Ellen Netting and her colleagues in the 6th edition of their book on social work macro practice that I'll share with you, and Associate Professor Monica Lacey, who teaches at Salem State, they and we all talk about cultural humility as a process of genuine engagement with another, a process of genuine engagement with another. Now, Monica says it's critical that each person or each group recognizes that they're experts only in their own life experience. That we're all, when we're engaging with others, we're all lifelong learners. I remember way back, Healthy Family, Healthy Start, Claudia Colton. I was from Harlem, but going into our public housing, I was still a guest. I'm looking forward to your session. Monica talks about the need to provide a space as safe as possible because, my friends, there are truly no totally safe spaces, okay? But when you lead with heart and love, you're protected. But as safe as possible, when you create those kind of spaces for our clients and ourselves and their families and their small groups, allow them to have that space to share their own truth in their own words and even in their own languages. So when I spoke with Monica further about this preparation for being with you all here today, because I'm really proud to be here, she told me that her students, like my own students, say that they appreciate this perspective, that they feel less stereotyped. And one of Monica's students actually said when he took this perspective to cultural humility to the agency that he's involved in his field placement, he took them and he encouraged his coworkers to engage in conversations using this framework of cultural humility with their clients. They began to see themselves as learners and their clients as the professionals. And they began to treat clients with honor as people and not just cases. So in training child welfare workers, social work professors Robert Ortega and Kathleen Fowler identify 4 skills that are required in our service providers' ability to demonstrate cultural humility: active listening, reflecting, reserving judgment, and entering into the client's world. Terms we're all familiar with, right? All of these concepts and practices are ones that we know. We just have to remember to use them. Now, I'm looking at just 8 of today's sessions that include content on the impact of race and age and gender and sexual identities on socio-emotional health and human services. We can easily see how cultural humility can essentially be core to creating and sustaining socially just systems for all, especially those increasingly marginalized in our country and around the world. Creating opportunities for ongoing education and training in cultural humility throughout our communities, including our neighborhood places of worship, our K-12 and graduate schools of all disciplines, our social service agencies, our business corporations. That would be a great first step. Then coming together to insist that our elected politicians and policymakers actually demonstrate a commitment to the core tenets of cultural humility as evidenced by what they say and what they do would be an important next step. We can also see how being culturally humble requires us to be genuinely honest, not simply revealing a truth to gain power over someone. In fact, being culturally humble requires a type of honesty that recognizes our own powerlessness, an appreciation that comes from our completeness, our only real power, when we realize how little we actually know about another person. And sometimes that can even make us afraid. And that's why a lot of people don't embrace the whole idea of getting to really know other folks. But in moving in this direction and embracing this as our shared reality, only then are we able to move forward, sometimes even being humiliated along the way. In short, actions like these would go a long way ensuring that cultural humility in our families, in our communities, and our policies move from simply being espoused to being enacted. That's a winning combination for us all, wouldn't you say? Wouldn't you say? Remember, I'm from Harlem, okay? So we always get a call back. And I'm in Cleveland. Oh my gosh. Now lastly, the fourth lens through which we look at social justice is one that Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. refer to as agape love. Those are just two of everyone's heroes. I hope they're everyone's heroes that I want to mention. Now, this type of love that we call radical love is stronger than the love between two adults. It's even stronger than the love a parent has for a child. Because radical love is the love for another simply because that person exists. It's not about who that person is, or what that person does, or who or what that person knows. Radical love is a transcendent love for all, again, simply because they exist. Now, we can easily imagine what radical self-love can lead to. And it's not, my friends, what's mistakenly heard from around the place of narcissism. We read a lot about that. We hear a lot about that. Narcissism is an inflated sense of self-importance. When radical love is united with forgiveness and courage and compassion and cultural humility, true social justice is the result. Looking at many of our sessions today, imagine parents that may not live together, yet act together in matters of their children. Whole families that risk sharing this type of love in their communities. That would indeed make it radical. What would be the impact on them and their communities if their organizations and the policies that, as I said at the outset, are designed to serve them actually had this in their mission, their purpose, their reason for being? If these organizations and policies had this as an integral part of the services that they provide. Now, to begin to close our time together and leave time for, as I said, the real learning, I admit that this is a different way to think about and begin to act on behalf of social justice. Yet I urge you to keep this perspective in mind over the rest of this very precious time together and beyond. To help with that, I've included a slide with information to find the references that I've spoken about, that I've highlighted today in order of appearance. Perhaps we can even get copies of some of these references if you'd like to look up some of these books and guides. Now, just like me, there are some people that argue that ending slavery was not just a moral or an ethical decision, but also part of an economic plan. And just like HIV/AIDS received major attention only when it spread beyond a certain community of people and demographics. And just as we all had to live longer, to be able to vote longer, to be able to spend more money in order for elder care to be taken seriously and supported by legislation, so can movements like this one gain momentum and impact by social justice warriors like ourselves. The strength of this movement, our movement, must be stronger than the counter movement that undoubtedly will come. Because for every movement, there's always been and will always be a counter movement. We should not have been surprised when Barack Obama came in and he and Michelle, who showed up as real people, that the backlash, and there are other reasons, but the backlash ended up where we ended up with 45. We must remember, and that wasn't a political statement, that was a fact. We must remember that our power is in our growing number of people locally, throughout our counties, our states, our country, and across the world. That this movement, because I've been in Israel, I've been in Cuba, I've been in Mexico, I've been talking this talk, and this is growing, this movement is growing. And we need to remember that this too will go and has to go beyond ethical and legal and moral imperatives. We must make sure that everyone knows that we're at a moment in time, a point of inflection, where never before has it been more important for us to come together as one, to find ways to make our families, our communities safer and healthier for us all. Only through a framework that acknowledges and honors the past, that shows us how to forgive ourselves and even some of our broken systems, that recognizes our own limitations and our abilities, that attends to the present with courageous and compassionate lenses and cultural humility. Only through such a paradigm can we help everyone, individuals, their families, their small groups, their organizations, their communities, understand the meaning of radical love for envisioning and working toward a preferred future for themselves and others. Only by unleashing the combined power of case and cause in micro and macro education and through direct practice can we understand the imperative, the urgency, the emergency to dismantle unjust structures, to tear down and to start anew with practices that positively impact the future of our families, the future of our communities and the organizations and the communities, the organizations and the policies intended to serve them. I urge you to look at the issues explored in your sessions today through even one of these social justice lessons. Now, trust what you remember from this time together this morning will be exactly what you need. So you don't have to remember all 4 of them. It'd be great if you did. But whatever has stuck with you, use that during your time with your sessions this afternoon. Think about what you can do to use these powers to personally enact and publicly advocate to evoke and sustain genuine social justice for all, right here, right now, in Cuyahoga County. Now, going back to our picture on the cover of our wonderful Reflections journal, more references. Reflections journal. We can now better understand why seeing even one golden horse was accurate, remembering that no healthy horse is ever far from his herd makes our understanding complete. As social justice warriors, seeing and attending to the needs of either macro or micro direct practice is accurate. However, appreciating, addressing, and unleashing the collective power that can only come from the wisdom of the entire client system makes the services provided by our profession and professions complete. Now more than ever, just as with the horses, the contributions of everyone are essential for the sheer survivability and thriveability of our world as we not yet know it, yet dare to hope it. Yes, social justice warriors, breathe and then unite. Thank you so very much for this time. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much. I am hopeful that we have a little bit of time. Okay, so we got some, I used to do an Oprah-esque thing, but I, with my cough syrup and all, if I try to run around, I may not be able to make it. So let's have at it. You've got questions? Remember, I am sick, so gentle. But anything, seriously, anything you want to ask, anything you want to say. I'm going to try to just move this. It's hard to stay behind a podium for me. This side of the room gets that. Oh, okay. Do you want me to go over there or grab it? Thank you for the water. I wasn't sure you remember.
With the shuttle, and the transportation issue getting started later, we just notified all the presenters that they will go until noon, so they know that people will be coming a few minutes late. So we do have time for maybe 1, 2, or 3 questions.
My name's Kevin. I'm a first year master's student, and
Okay.
so I'm in the macro program at the University of Akron, and in the micro program. And I'm wondering, they're inviting us to consider macro, and so you talked about, I think you talked about social justice and that's important, but I, as someone new, don't see the path that you told us that is there, that we need to have faith for. So, I like to have intelligent faith, as different cultures call it, which is to at least see something might be there. So how does one go from not having an understanding at all of what macro is? So presently, my understanding is that's just when you get promoted from being a good social worker and you get to be the boss. And so that's my limited, very narrow view, sophomoric view. So how does it go to what you're talking about? How does that path happen?
Okay.
Like, where does that go?
It was Mark.
Kevin.
Kevin. I'm looking at Mark. Okay. Kevin, first of all, buddy up with a macro person. They're all around. That's the first thing. The second thing, you don't have to look far. Your clients are your best teachers. You're in macro and micro direct clinical practice. When you go to your field placement, you'll automatically be introduced to macro systems because your clients will come from families. They will interface with organizations. They live in communities, right? Okay, that's the macro system that they're in. That's the world that you need to understand in order to best serve them. How does the organization, how does their neighborhood, how does it impact them? It's not just the intrapsychic piece, but it's all the realities of everything that's going on around them that will shape their quote-unquote presenting problem, that will shape the reason why you're meeting with them either as individuals or in small groups. Your best teachers will be the people that you'll be working with. Please, please, Kevin, stay awake. Someone once said to me, what am I most afraid of in life? I'll tell you. It's people that aren't woke, as Oprah magazine talks about, what I talk about, people that are asleep. Because when people are asleep, they're not awake. They'll bump into you. They'll trip over you. Stay awake. The teachers are there. The teachers will be there. As Betsy Tracy said when she got one of the awards that I'm also just so thrilled to have received, Teacher of the Year. As she got it, she talked about when the adage, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. What a place of humility she came from. It's real. If you're ready, you've got a lot of teachers out there that will help you to go from a deep dive to a wide angle lens. Do not worry. Just stay awake. I promise you. And I got my email address. I want to hear from you in about a year. I'm serious. Okay, come on, another question. This side of the room. It's got to be somebody over here. I know. I know.
Hi, Dr. Bailey. My name is Tanya Richmond, and I'm a second-year MSAS student. I also work for Cuyahoga Job and Family Services. So what's most on my heart about macro practice, the department that I'm in, we work specifically with clients who have been identified as work required in order to stay eligible or maintain their eligibility for cash and SNAP benefits. One of the things that I perceive as an obstacle to many of our clients and a challenge is when they need services in addition to job search, job readiness, how to do an interview, how to dress, when they need mental health services. And sometimes our social benefits program doesn't cover the time that they need to participate in those activities. Long shortening an already long statement, is what's on my heart is to impact social benefits programming policy to be inclusive of somebody who needs mental health services while we prepare them to sustain employment. But it seems like, you know, a huge Goliath-sized mountain, and how do you begin to impact that and begin to widen those borders and structures to be able to provide clients a holistic approach while they can still maintain the benefits that they need to survive? What would you suggest?
Tanya, thank you. You got it. It's on your heart. Listen to your heart. You know that the way we have set ourselves up in academia, and unfortunately in the real world as well, is through siloed policies, siloed services. We talk about case management, and then what we do is we burden, overload, and make it impossible for case managers to effectively do their jobs because they've got these ridiculous amount of people, vulnerable children and families, elders to be responsible to and for, okay? It's on your heart because you know there's another way. We can talk, but there's a way to cross-stitch. The clients can be mobilized. The clients can say, you know what? I got that, but this is what I need. You can help prepare them to go to this other unit, get what they need, and say, you know what? It'd be awesome. I'd really appreciate it if you could talk to the person over here that oversees the SNAP, that oversees some of my other benefits. Let the clients become their own advocates. Empower them through your power, and I can feel your power. You got it. It's on your heart. Again, listen to your heart. There are ways to do this. When Healthy Family, Healthy Start first started, infant mortality was out the wazoo. We are not nearly where Mike White wanted us to be after several years, thanks my involvement to this incredible woman named Claudia Colton. But we're a lot closer, and it's thrilling to see it goes on. So all it takes is one person, the power of one. All it takes is one person working with and through your heart and the hearts of those that get this.